The streets of Ajegunle, a bustling neighborhood in Lagos, hummed with life. The air was thick with the sound of honking cars, the chatter of vendors selling goods, and the laughter of children playing soccer on the dirt roads. In the middle of this chaos stood Mama and Tayo's Diner, an unassuming but beloved establishment that had served the community for over a decade. The diner's faded sign swayed gently in the breeze, and the aroma of fried plantains and grilled fish wafted out to passers-by, luring them inside. Zainab Ibrahim, a 2-3-year-old woman with a warm smile and a heart full of hope, moved swiftly behind the counter, taking orders and preparing meals for the steady stream of customers. Despite the chaotic nature of her life, juggling multiple jobs, studying at Unilag, and caring for her ailing mother, she always greeted everyone with kindness, seeing the humanity in every person she met. Today, however, her patience was put to the test. In the corner of the diner sat an older man, his clothes torn and covered in dust. His face was hidden, and his shoes were worn to the point of falling apart. The other patrons, sitting in groups, began whispering and laughing at him, their judgment clear in their eyes. Zainab, sensing the uncomfortable atmosphere, walked over to the man. She had seen too many people like him in the neighborhood, people who were often looked down upon, dismissed as invisible. She could see that this man, despite his appearance, carried a quiet dignity that the others did not understand. "Sir, what can I get for you?" she asked with a genuine smile, her voice gentle and respectful. The man looked up, his eyes tired but kind. "Just water," he said in a hoarse voice. Zainab nodded, feeling the weight of the others' stares but refusing to acknowledge them. She poured him a glass of water and placed it gently in front of him. "Take your time," she said softly, before turning to attend to the other customers. The mocking laughter from the other patrons continued, but Zainab kept her composure, refusing to let it affect her. As she walked away, she could feel the man's eyes on her, and something about his gaze made her pause. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that instant, she realized that he wasn't just any homeless man. There was something more to him, something that made her feel like she was doing the right thing. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of love, communication, and empathy are told. If you're enjoying this already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share with your friends, and tell me your thoughts in the comments section below. Outside the diner, a black SUV parked discreetly on the side of the road. Chief Bamidele Adewale, the CEO of Adewale Technologies, sat inside, observing the scene through the tinted windows. His gaze lingered on Zainab as she returned to the counter, her presence a stark contrast to the other diner's mocking attitude. He watched her interaction with the man, noting the kindness and respect she showed despite the judgment surrounding him. There was something deeply moving about how she treated him, something that made him question his own actions. Bamidele had been watching the neighborhood for the past week, all part of a challenge his business partner, Julian Kola, had set for him. Julian had grown increasingly frustrated with Bamidele's detachment from the realities of ordinary Nigerians, especially considering the decisions Bamidele made from his high-rise office. Julian had accused him of losing touch with the very people whose lives his company affected. The challenge was simple: no assistance, no private cars, no luxuries. Bamidele was to live as a common man for 1 week, with only 30,000 naira in his pocket. No more corporate privileges. No more power. Just a normal, struggling Nigerian. And for 1 week, Bamidele had been forced to confront the harshness of a world he had long ignored. But today, as he watched Zainab offer kindness to the homeless man, something shifted within him. This wasn't just about surviving the streets. This was about understanding the true cost of corporate decisions, the kind that Adewale Technologies made without ever considering the impact on the people below. Yet, as he looked at Zainab's face, he realized she represented something far more valuable: dignity, respect, and humanity. Things he had failed to consider in his own world of boardrooms and skyscrapers. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is going to happen next? Your feedback helps this channel grow and helps us bring you more incredible stories of love, empathy, and change. The days blurred together for Bamidele. What had started as an experiment, a challenge to understand the struggles of ordinary Nigerians, was rapidly becoming a harsh reality. As the week unfolded, Bamidele had been pushed to his limits, forced to navigate the gritty streets of Ajegunle with nothing but his wits and the 30,000 naira he had been given. He had expected some discomfort, but nothing could have prepared him for the overwhelming sense of invisibility that came with being a man without power. No one looked at him twice. No one offered a helping hand. And when he walked through the streets, it was as if he didn't even exist. The first few days had been the hardest. His clothes, which had once been crisp and tailored, now hung on his body like a forgotten second skin. His shoes, torn and mismatched, made each step a painful reminder of how out of place he was. For the first time in years, Bamidele found himself standing in line at a street corner stall, waiting to buy something as simple as a meal of jollof rice and fried fish. He had money, but the act of being treated like everyone else, like someone who didn't matter, struck him in a way he hadn't expected. When he first stepped into Mama and Tayo's diner, he had walked in with the quiet confidence of a man who knew he could buy anything he wanted. But that confidence melted away as Zainab served him with the same respect she gave to everyone else. In her, he saw the kind of humanity that had been missing in his life, a kindness that wasn't rooted in power or wealth, but simply in the act of being human. Zainab's unwavering kindness toward him, even though he was disguised in his tattered clothes, had left a lasting impact. For the first time since arriving in Ajegunle, he felt seen not as a CEO, but as a person. Yet, as much as he was drawn to her strength and compassion, he couldn't help but feel the sting of guilt. He had been part of the very corporate machine that had pushed people like Zainab and the elderly man at the diner to the margins. He remembered the Ajegunle Technologies real estate project, the one that had been slated to demolish neighborhoods like Ajegunle for a luxury development. The project had been approved months ago, and it was already too late to stop it. But now, as he saw Zainab working tirelessly, her warmth and generosity untouched by the judgment around her, Bamidele felt a deep pang of regret. How had he allowed his company to do this? How had he, in his pursuit of profit and growth, allowed the invisible people of the world to become nothing more than obstacles in his way? He knew now that he had been blind to the true cost of his decisions. The real estate development wasn't just about clearing land to build luxury apartments. It was about displacing people like Zainab, who had worked her entire life to create a place for her family and her community. It was about uprooting lives, about tearing down the places where people like Zainab found hope and connection. Late one evening, after another long day of walking the streets and talking to the people of Ajegunle, Bamidele sat on a bench near the diner. The night air was heavy, the heat still lingering despite the late hour. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't look at it. He had stopped checking his emails and messages a few days ago. What was the point of returning to the world he had left behind? He thought of Zainab again. Her smile had been the only thing that had made his days feel a little less unbearable. She had no idea who he was, no idea that the very company he ran was set to destroy the community she cared for so much. She had no reason to show him kindness, yet she did. And it was that kindness that made Bamidele realize something he had never considered before. He had been living in a world that was far too small, a world where his actions, his wealth, and his decisions didn't touch the lives of people who needed him most. The next morning, Bamidele woke up to the sound of rain beating against the windows of the small room he had been staying in. He hadn't slept well, the weight of his thoughts pressed down on him, and he knew what he had to do. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. The man staring back at him was someone he barely recognized, a man who had lost touch with what truly mattered, a man who had never truly seen the people his company had affected. He was no longer the powerful CEO. In that moment, he was just another man, struggling to find his place in a world that had forgotten people like him. But he couldn't continue living in this state of ignorance. He couldn't keep making decisions that hurt people. Zainab's kindness had cracked open something inside him, and now he was determined to make things right. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of anxiety and purpose. Bamidele knew he had to act. He could no longer sit back in his high-rise office, detached from the pain his company's actions were causing. The Ajegunle Technologies project had already begun its destruction of Ajegunle, and with each passing moment, the weight of his decisions grew heavier on his shoulders. He spent hours researching the development project, diving into the files and contracts he had once signed without a second thought. Every document, every plan, seemed to mock him now. His signature was there, next to the plans to tear down homes and displace families. The very people who had shown him compassion like Zainab were the ones who would lose everything to his decisions. Guilt gnawed at him. Bamidele had always been a man of action, a businessman used to making decisions with the flick of a pen, thinking in terms of profits and losses. But now, as he sat in his dimly lit office late one night, he saw the faces of the people in Ajegunle, people like Zainab, and he wondered how he could possibly have been so blind to their struggles. How had he allowed himself to be so out of touch? He dialed Julian Cola's number, his hands shaking slightly as he pressed the phone to his ear. Julian had been the one to challenge him in the first place, pushing him to see the world through the eyes of the people he had been so eager to push aside. Now, Bamidele needed his help to undo the damage. Julian. Bamidele's voice cracked. I've seen it. I understand now. We need to stop the demolition. I'm calling for an immediate halt to the project. I'm canceling it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Julian didn't respond right away. He was a seasoned businessman, and Bamidele could sense the surprise in his silence. You can't be serious, Julian finally said, his voice measured. The contracts are signed. The investors are waiting for their returns. Stopping the project now would cost us millions. I know the cost, Bamidele replied, his voice firm despite the tension in his chest. But I've realized the real price we're paying. The lives we're destroying, the people we're pushing out of their homes. It's not worth it. I'm taking responsibility for this. Bamidele hung up the phone with a heavy heart, but there was a sense of finality in his actions. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he could redeem himself, when he could right the wrongs his company had caused. The next morning, he went to Mama and Tayo's diner. Zainab was there. As always, her eyes focused on the stove, the smell of fried plantains and grilled fish filling the air. She looked up when he entered, but her expression remained neutral, guarded. She had no reason to trust him, and he understood that. Zainab, he said, his voice low but resolute. I need to talk to you. She nodded, but didn't respond immediately. He could see the skepticism in her eyes, the walls she had built up around herself. After all, she had seen too many people like him, people who made promises and failed to keep them. I've spoken with the board, he continued. I've stopped the project. The demolition is cancelled. The community is safe. Zainab didn't react immediately. She simply stared at him, her face unreadable. Bamidele could feel the weight of her silence pressing in on him. He had expected anger, disappointment, perhaps even disbelief, but what he saw in her eyes was something far more complicated. She had been fighting for so long, surviving in a world that didn't care about her or the people she loved. Now, Bamidele was asking her to believe that he was sincere, that he was a man capable of change. Why? Zainab asked, her voice soft but sharp. Why what? Bamidele replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. Why now? She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. After everything? After all the damage? Why would I believe you now? After all that you've done? No. Bamidele swallowed hard, feeling the sting of her words. He had no easy answer for her. There was no quick fix, no excuse that could undo the harm his company had caused. But he owed her the truth, even if it meant admitting how wrong he had been. I was blind, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was making progress, but I never saw the people who were paying the price for that progress. I never saw you. I never saw your community. There was a long pause. Zainab didn't respond at first. She simply studied him, as though trying to determine whether he was telling the truth, or whether this was just another lie wrapped in good intentions. Finally, she spoke. "It's not enough,"
It's just not
she said,
enough.
her tone quieter now, but the resolve still evident in her voice. "You can stop the project, but the damage has already been done. You can't erase what's been lost." Bamidele nodded. She was right. He couldn't undo the past. But he could start building something better, something that didn't rely on the destruction of others for its growth. "I know," he said, "but I can start with you. With this. And I'll keep fighting. No matter how long it takes. Not just for you, but for everyone who's been hurt by the decisions I made." The days after Bamidele's apology were filled with tense silence. Zainab kept to herself, carefully observing every move Bamidele made, every action he took. Despite his words, she couldn't let go of the past. Not just the past of corporate greed, but the painful history of broken promises. She had seen men like him before, powerful men who spoke of change but never followed through. But Bamidele was different. There was something in his eyes when he spoke about Ajegunle Technologies, a quiet determination, an honesty that was rare for someone in his position. Zainab couldn't help but wonder if he truly meant what he said. Still, she knew better than to put her trust in anyone too quickly. Her heart had been broken too many times before. She kept her distance, but her mind was conflicted. How could someone who had lived a life of privilege, someone who had never truly seen the struggles of the poor, understand the deep wounds left by years of neglect? How could Bamidele truly change? Days passed, and Bamidele didn't give up. He showed up every morning at Mama and Teo's diner, not as the CEO of a company, but as a man who was learning what it meant to be human again. He worked alongside Zainab, taking orders, cleaning tables, and interacting with the customers. He listened, truly listened, as the regulars spoke about their lives, their struggles, their hopes. He learned that the people of Ajegunle weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were families, dreamers, fighters. But most of all, Zainab watched him. She watched how he interacted with the customers, how he took their stories to heart, how he treated everyone with the respect they deserved. She saw the changes he was making, though subtle, and couldn't help but wonder if this was more than just a temporary phase. One afternoon, as the diner filled with the usual crowd, Zainab was behind the counter, working her usual shift. She saw Bamidele talking to one of the regulars, Uncle Seyi, an old man who had been coming to the diner for years. Bamidele leaned in as Uncle Seyi spoke about his health problems, nodding and offering advice in a way that felt genuine, as if he truly cared. A small, almost unnoticeable smile tugged at Zainab's lips. She hadn't seen him like this before. Bamidele had always been focused on profits, on growth, on the next big deal. But now, he was giving his time to someone who couldn't offer him anything in return. Uncle Seyi wasn't a potential investor. He was just a man trying to survive in a world that didn't always care. Zainab couldn't help herself. She walked over to the counter, watching them for a moment longer, before her voice broke the silence. "Bamidele," she called out, "I see you've been doing a lot of listening lately." He looked up at her, a little surprised by her tone. Zainab's eyes were softer now, her usual skepticism replaced by something like curiosity. "I'm learning," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I've been so focused on growing my company, on building, that I forgot about the people who really matter. I think I have a lot of work to do." Zainab stepped closer, her gaze thoughtful. She had seen many men come into this diner, men who talked about making things better, but never truly followed through. But Bamidele wasn't just talking anymore, he was doing. "Bamidele," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "Words are easy. Actions, they're the true measure of change. You have to show the people here that you mean it." He nodded, his expression serious. "I know, and I will." Later that day, Bamidele left the diner early, telling Zainab he had some important calls to make. But he didn't go back to his office. Instead, he went straight to the Ajegunle Technologies headquarters. He sat in his sleek office, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. His mind raced. Zainab had told him that actions speak louder than words, and he knew she was right. But how could he prove that? He picked up his phone and called his legal team, requesting an immediate meeting. He needed to act quickly to stop the demolition. No more delays, no more empty promises. Ajegunle had suffered enough, and he was going to make sure that his company didn't contribute to their pain any longer. By the time the sun set, Bamidele had a plan. He would not just halt the project. He would revamp it, ensuring that the community was a part of the development process. He would create jobs, support local businesses, and build affordable housing. Ajegunle Technologies would be a force for good in Ajegunle, not a company that destroyed homes to make a profit. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. Zainab would be watching, and so would the entire community. Bamidele had to prove that he wasn't just a man of words, but a man of actions. As Zainab closed up the diner later that night, she couldn't help but feel a small shift in the air. She didn't know if Bamidele's transformation was permanent, but she saw the effort in his eyes. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Days passed, and the air in Ajegunle began to feel different. There was a quiet hope that started to stir in the hearts of the people, though it was still fragile. Bamidele kept his word. He met with the community leaders, listening intently as they shared their concerns, their dreams, and their frustrations. He worked late into the night, drafting plans that would integrate the needs of the community into the development project. In the meantime, Zainab kept working at Mama and Tayo's diner. But now, there was a sense of purpose in everything she did. She saw more of Bamidele, who now visited the diner almost every day, not as the CEO in disguise, but as a man who was trying to make up for the damage his decisions had caused. Though Zainab had been skeptical at first, her heart slowly began to soften. She had spent her life protecting herself, shielding her emotions from the world that had constantly let her down. But Bamidele's efforts were starting to make a difference. His apologies had been more than just words. They had been backed up by actions, concrete plans that had begun to show real promise. One morning, as Zainab prepared the diner for the day's first customers, Bamidele arrived earlier than usual, a stack of papers in his hand. He was no longer dressed in his tailored suits, but in simple jeans and a shirt, blending in with the environment in a way that was now genuine. He walked in with a quiet confidence, his eyes reflecting the weight of responsibility he had taken on. "I have something for you," he said, as he approached the counter. He placed the stack of papers in front of Zainab, who looked up, her brow furrowed in curiosity. "What's this?" she asked, not yet fully convinced. "These are the plans for the new development," he explained. "I've reworked them with the community's needs in mind. We're not just building luxury apartments anymore. We're creating affordable housing. And we're investing in local businesses. I want Ajegunle Technologies to be a positive force here, to build something that benefits Ajegunle." Zainab looked down at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. She had seen so many promises broken in the past, so many men come and go, speaking words of change but never following through. But something about Bamidele's eyes, the sincerity, the weariness from the burden he had taken on, made her pause. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where her community didn't have to choose between survival and dignity. One where they could grow, not at the expense of others, but alongside them. "I'll help," Zainab said finally, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'll help lead this project, but we do it together. All of us. This community deserves more than just a handout. They deserve a seat at the table." The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Bamidele worked tirelessly with Zainab and the other community leaders to put the new plans into motion. The Community First initiative became a reality. Local businesses were provided with grants and resources, and small businesses like Mama and Tayo's Diner began to thrive again, bolstered by the support they had never received before. Zainab, now leading the initiative, felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. The struggles she had faced juggling work, Caring for her ailing mother and fighting for a place in a world that didn't care felt more meaningful now. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something that would last. And Bamidele, who had once been the face of corporate indifference, was now by her side, learning what it meant to be a true leader. His role had shifted from a detached CEO to a partner in the cause. The lessons he had learned on the streets of Ajegunle had opened his eyes to the reality that real leadership came not from power, but from the ability to listen, to empathize, and to make decisions that would elevate those around him. One evening, as the sun set over the Ajegunle skyline, Zainab sat outside the diner, watching the community as they gathered, chatting, laughing, and sharing meals together. Bamidele joined her, sitting quietly for a moment before speaking. "We did it, didn't we?" he asked, his voice low but full of pride. "We did," Zainab replied with a smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But we couldn't have done it without everyone. It's their strength that made this work." Bamidele nodded. "And it's their strength that will continue to drive this forward. I just want to be a part of that." For the first time since he had arrived in Ajegunle, Bamidele felt truly at peace. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he was no longer the man he once was. He had faced his own flaws, confronted his privilege, and committed himself to a life of purpose, one that was rooted in connection, empathy, and responsibility. As Zainab looked at Bamidele, she knew that the journey had only just begun. There would be challenges ahead, there always were, but this time, they were facing them together. Zainab's faith in Bamidele had been tested, and though the scars of the past still lingered, she had found a way to trust again. The community was healing, and with it, so were they. Ajegunle Technologies had a new mission, one that served the people, not just the profits. This story reminds us that true transformation comes when we face our flaws, acknowledge our privilege, and choose to act with empathy. Bamidele's journey from indifference to accountability shows that change is possible, but it requires real effort and commitment. Zainab, with her resilience and wisdom, teaches us that even when trust is hard to give, it's not impossible. Together, they've built more than just a business. They've built a future of hope. Let this be a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference in our communities, one kind action at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and comment the lesson you're taking home today. Your voice truly matters here.